Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Punjavihari Jaya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya. Vishnu Bhadavaham Smavarajagacharya, Sadasi Sivadesi, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai, Namacharya Das Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Sagaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Sri Gaur Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai, Sri Radha Krishna Govardhan Shama Kunda Radha Kudagiri Govardhan Ki Jai, Sri Vrindavan Ki Jai, Navadiptam Ki Jai, Gang Jamuna Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakti Ki Jai, Go Premanandi. All glories to Sam devotees. All glories to Sam devotees. All glories to Sam devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswata Deve Gauravani Prachadane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastatya Deshitadane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 11, Chapter 2, verse 49, partway through. Within the material world, one's material body is always subject to birth and decay. Similarly, the life air is harassed by hunger and thirst. The mind is always anxious. The intelligence hankers for that which cannot be obtained, and all the senses are also a constant struggle in the material nature. A person who is not bewildered by the inevitable miseries of material existence, who remains aloof from them simply by remembering the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is to be considered Bhagavata Pradhana, the foremost devotee of the Lord. Which paragraph? Which means what? According to Srila Madhvacharya, sinful life is the demoniac standard for happiness. We can observe that in demoniac societies, the dark late hours of night are considered most appropriate for recreational activity. When a demon hears that someone is rising at 4 o'clock in the morning to take advantage of the godly early morning hours, he is astonished and bewildered. Therefore, it is said in Bhagavad Gita, Yanisha sarva bhutanam tasyam jagarati sangyami yasyam jagrati bhutani sanisha pasyato mune. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled, and the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage. Srila Prabhupada has commented there are two classes of intelligent men. The one is intelligent in material activities for sense gratification, the other is introspective and awake to cultivation of self-realization. Thus, the more one can increase illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling, the more one advances his prestige in a demoniac society, whereas in a godly society based on Krishna consciousness, these things are abolished completely. Similarly, as one becomes blissfully attached to the holy name and pastimes of Krishna, one becomes more and more alienated from demoniac society. The demons are self-proclaimed enemies of the Supreme Lord, and they mock his kingdom. Thus they are described by Srila Madhvacharya as adogate, or those who have purchased their tickets to the darkest regions of hell. On the other hand, if one is undisturbed by the miseries of material life, he's on the same spiritual level as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, yam hi na vyatayante purushashaba samadukha sukham dhiram so mritatvaya kalpate. O best among men, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. One can come to this transcendental stage only by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the words of Madhvacharya, Sampurn Anugrahat Vishnu. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has described the process by which one becomes an Uttam Adhikari. If one is fortunate, he gradually becomes disgusted with the limited vision and activities of the Kanishta Adhikari and learns to appreciate the expanded vision of the Madhyama Adhikari, who is able to recognize that every living entity should become a devotee of Krishna and that one achieves the perfection of life by following in the footsteps of an Uttam Adhikari devotee of the Lord. As one's devotional service gradually intensifies and one repeatedly bathes in dust from the lotus feet of a pure devotee, the harassment of birth, death, hunger, thirst, fear, and so on gradually cease disturbing the mind. As stated in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, alabde va vinaste va bhaktya charana sadhane aviklava matir bhutva haryam eva diya smaret. Even if a devotee is frustrated in his attempt to eat properly or clothe himself properly, he should not allow this material failure to disturb his mind. Rather, he should use his intelligence to remember his master, Lord Krishna, and thus remain undisturbed. As one becomes mature in this process of remembering Krishna in all circumstances, he is awarded the title Maha Bhagavata. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati gives the example that just as a child's ball may be fastened to the end of a rope so that it cannot bounce away, a devotee who surrenders to Krishna becomes tied to the rope of Vedic injunction and is never lost in worldly affairs. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is quoted from the Rig Veda as follows: Om Asya Jana To Nama Chidvi Vaktana Vaktan Mahaste Vishnu Sumatim Bhajamahe Om Tat Sat. O Vishnu, your name is completely transcendental, thus it is self-manifested. Indeed, even without properly understanding the glories of your name, if we vibrate your name with at least a little understanding of its glories, that is, if we simply repeat the syllables of your holy name, gradually we understand it. The supreme entity indicated by the pranava Om is Sat, or self-revealing. Therefore, if one is disturbed by fear or envy, the transcendental form of the Supreme Personality of God will become manifest to one who continues to chant the Lord's holy name. Further evidence is given in Srimad Bhagavatam, Sanketyam Parihasyam Vastobam Helanam Eva Va, Vaikuntanama Grahanam Asesh Agaharam Vidu. One who chants the holy name of the Lord is immediately freed from the reaction of unlimited sins, even if he chants indirectly to indicate something else, jokingly, for musical entertainment, or even neglectfully. This is accepted by all the learned scholars of the scriptures. So, as was previously described, there are some verses to describe the Bhagavat Uttama, the highest type of devotee, after defining the three types. And as we saw, the basic definition of the Uttama was that he sees the Lord everywhere in all circumstances, within and without, because he has a vision of Prema. And then after describing the Madhyama and the Kanishta, then again some verses are given to describe the Uttama. But these verses are not necessarily the main characteristics of the Uttama, rather we find some secondary qualities as well. Previously, the Uttama was described as having his senses very controlled, so that even though his senses contact sense objects, he's not disturbed. He has no agitation, he has no rejoicing, he has no disgust, nothing in relation to sense objects. And this verse is quite similar, talking about the harassment of material nature in the material body, in the material senses, etc. But the Uttama devotee is not at all disturbed by any of this, because he is remembering the lotus feet of the Lord, smritya harer. By remembering the Lord at all times, then he remains very peaceful and is unbewildered in this case. So, to be unbewildered by material nature is definitely a quality of the Uttama devotee, but it's not his distinguishing character, because the Gyanis and the Yogis are also unbewildered by material energy. They become detached from sense objects, etc. So this is an accompanying factor. The main factor, of course, is that he has attachment to the Supreme Lord, which is absolute. Consequently, he's not attracted or disturbed by anything else in this world. So this is a secondary quality of the devotee. Nevertheless, we can say it's one sign, external sign, that will help us recognize a great devotee. But we can't take it in isolation, because we can equally see this visible in a Jnani or a Yogi, but he's not a great devotee of the Lord. He has no attraction for the Lord at all. So therefore we shouldn't confuse the definition and think that therefore anyone who is detached is a great devotee. They may be a great devotee, and definitely it's one of the qualities, but it's not the only quality, and it's not the principal quality. So we often see lists of qualities of the devotee. For instance, in Bhagavad Gita we'll find a whole list of qualities of the devotee. And we find, like in 12th chapter, is a glorification of the devotee, and it gives lists of his qualities. And in Bhagavatam as well, in various places, we have lists of qualities like Istatiksha, Karunika, etc. Chaitanya Charitamrita also gives a list of characteristics of a devotee, etc. But then it is pointed out that of all these qualities, the main quality is surrender to the Lord. That's the main quality. So that's the one we really have to look for, and the others are accompanying factors which confirm his position as being surrendered to the Lord. Therefore, we should not simply take the secondary qualities and ignore the main quality. The main quality is his dedication to the Supreme Lord. Just as in Chaitanya Charitamrita describes who's qualified to be a guru. He could be a sannyasi, he could be a sudra, he could be a brahmana or a brahmachari or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But he should know Krishna. So that we have a main quality to distinguish, define a devotee. We have a main quality to define a uttam devotee. And we have a main quality to define a madhyama and a kanishta. And then we have some secondary qualities as well, which may or may not manifest at certain times. So we cannot always use the secondary qualities in isolation to judge a devotee. To make this a little more complicated, Nectar Devotion also says, in describing the devotee in the level of Prema, in the eastern section, the last fourth chapter of the east section where it discusses Prema. Of course, it describes the characteristics of the different types of devotee, those doing Vaidhi Bhakti, those doing Raganuga Bhakti, those in the level of Bhava, whatever, 13 characteristics there. And then it comes to Prema, then it simply says, it doesn't give any particular characteristics there.
And it says his actions cannot be described. Because whatever you say, he may not do that. He may do something else. So you really can't describe in terms of isolating certain characteristics of him. He has to do this, he has to do that, or whatever. And we see that by the contact or the example of some great devotees, that they may contradict what we would expect to be the characteristics of a great devotee. They may not follow the regular rules and regulations. For instance, someone like Bamsi Das Babaji, he did very strange things. Or even Gorkishore Das Babaji. He would clothe himself in he would take the corpses that floated down the Ganga and take their cloth, and he would wear that cloth, which is completely contaminated. Or he would chant his japa in the urinal, which is his most contaminated place. So how can you do anything in a urinal? But he would chant japa in his urinal. Like that. So, or one time it said he dressed up like a gentleman with had a whole nice Western clothing on and everything, and he was walking around like this, and everyone was surprised. Why is he doing that? So we cannot always predict the behavior of a great devotee. They do very contrary things. And of course, it's also said, I think in Chaitanya Bhagavat, do not criticize Nityananda if you see him go into a liquor store. Because Nityananda is also very unpredictable, and he may do strange things as well. But he never has any fault, because he's completely beyond the material world. So we know that the ultimate devotee is absorbed in the Lord, and he's not much concerned at all with society, people, customs, opinions of others, etc. He's completely absorbed in the Lord. So therefore, it's not that he deliberately breaks the rules of society, but he's just not aware of what is happening in society. So sometimes he may do things contrary to what one would expect a person to do in society. Unexpected. He does very unexpected things. So in that sense, unpredictable, and therefore we cannot really describe the characteristics of a person on the highest level. Yeah? Of course, we can also say that because he's absorbed in the spiritual world, it is difficult for anybody who is still in the material world to understand what is happening to him. So even though we may be devotees, when we see him, we still have some identification with our body, identification with society. We have material concepts we're imposing on our view of others. So therefore, we cannot properly judge a person on a higher level. It's very, very difficult to do so, especially if they're in Prema. So therefore, one has to refrain from judging them. Even in relation to a person on the bhava stage, Rupa Goswami warns that, again, do not criticize the person on bhava, even if it looks like he has some fault. And he gives the example of the moon. So the moon is considered very beautiful, and it's praised in the scriptures and by the poets, etc. It has very cooling rays. It's very pure. It's amrita, full of sweet nectar, etc. But if we look at the moon very carefully, we see the spots on the moon. So we can criticize the moon and say, it's got spots on it, so it's not so nice after all. So he says like that. You can also find some fault in the bhakta, but do not do that, because that may be a fault from our point of view, but not from his point of view. And because the bhakta is not on the highest level, he still has some impurity. There may be a fault. Even so, one should not criticize him. Because we are on a lower level. And we see, for instance, someone like Bharat Maharaj. He fell down and he remembered a deer when he was dying instead of remembering Vishnu. So we can criticize him for that. But why should we do that? Because 2 lives later he got Prema. So we see that the Lord made some very great arrangement for him. The Lord was not so concerned that he remembered a deer when he died. Of course, he gave him a deer body, but he also made an arrangement that he could remember his previous lifetime. So he advanced by that arrangement. So the Lord makes arrangement for these devotees, and it's not our right to criticize them. Similarly, we see even lesser devotees. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Apichet Sudaracharo, even he may be do the most sinful act. If he continues his devotional service in a very pure way, then Krishna says, Sadhur eva samantavya. He is considered to be a devotee. He is considered to be pure, in spite of the fact that he did a sinful activity. Why? Because he continues his devotional service. Of course, we also know that if one commits sin on the strength of the holy name, that is an aparad. So that cannot be there. But if a person commits a sin, but then he continues his devotional service very seriously, the Lord says, I accept that person. So he doesn't mind the sinful activity. He sees the positive point of engagement in the service of the Lord. So that's a much higher quality than the sinful activity is a negative quality, so it cancels it out. Similarly, the Lord says, of course, that aham tvam sarvapapaya mokshayami, I free you from all whatever sinful activity is there. By the process of bhakti, it is atoned for. It is cancelled out by the process of bhakti itself. So therefore, the Lord doesn't see the faults of the devotee. He sees the worship, the good quality of the devotee offering everything to the Lord. That is the important point. And of course, if there's aparat, that's another thing. The Lord, that has serious effect on one's devotion. So therefore, the Lord doesn't look at the faults so much. He's looking at the good quality of service. And of course, therefore, the devotees have to look in the same way, and they should not see the faults. They should see the good qualities of the devotees. So, on the highest level, the devotees in the lower level cannot judge properly. They're unaware what to speak of the materialists. They're completely, it's beyond their capacity to judge those devotees at all. To some degree, a Madhyamadikari can do something, but even then, he cannot perfectly determine the nature of a higher devotee. It's very, very difficult to do so. So therefore, one refrains from criticizing and finding fault in them. Whatever is there, let the Lord do. He has his own arrangements for all these devotees. So the main quality, of course, is that he's completely surrendered to the Lord, but it may be very difficult for us to determine how much he's surrendered. How can we do so? It's difficult because unless we enter into the same pastime in the spiritual world, we'll never know. So we're unqualified in one sense to pass judgment on him and understand his level of his advancement, etc. Now, we can look at the secondary qualities and see. As in this case, he should be detached from everything, control of the senses. But then, from our point of view, which something may look like lack of control of the senses, but it may not be. So, for instance, we see that if Gorky Chardas Babaji dresses up in the impure cloth from a corpse floating down the Ganga, we'll say, well, why? How can he do that? It's so impure. And so we'll criticize him for that. That's our point of view. So we can find fault in something like that. Why is he not following standards of purity or whatever like that? So our judgment, we should not let our standards of judgment cause criticism. With the external symptoms are there, but they're not always say hard and fast, and even if those devotees do something contrary to that, we cannot criticize them. At the same time, we have the position where people may imitate the great devotees of the Lord, rolling on the ground, crying, or whatever like this. So then, of course, simplistic, okay, they're great devotees, let's offer them respect, let's offer obeisances, etc. Then we also see them go out smoking cigarettes. So what do? Are they great devotees? And we have to not criticize them. So we get stuck in this position of, like that, what to do. So one solution, of course, is to observe them very carefully and to see if they're actually surrendered to the Supreme Lord. And if we can find many, many symptoms of that, and contrarily we see a sufficient number of external qualities, like sense control, etc., which support that, fine. Then we can say, okay, he's a great devotee. But if we do not see that he is always fixed in the Supreme Lord, etc., and at the same time we see contrary qualities, he's not controlling his senses, and we see a lot of qualities like that, then we have to conclude he's not really on that level. So we sometimes have to use our common sense also in judging these type of persons and devotees of the Lord. Nevertheless, we always give respect to all living entities, not just devotees or non-devotees, whatever. We try to respect all living entities of sorts, so that even those devotees who are not they're prakrita devotees like Kanishtas or whatever, we mentally respect. Even if they're not doing purely, they're not on the level of pure bhakti, still we give a little mental respect to them. And all. And of course sometimes we have to also avoid certain types of persons who maybe look like devotees as well. It may not be favorable for our devotional advancement. So the Madhyama, of course, has the ability to some degree to distinguish all of these things, and therefore according to this, he treats people differently, and this is a cause for his advancement. But at the same time, it's a little bit difficult for him to completely judge those who are on the Uttama platform, so he has to be very, very careful in that case.
You are saying that, this normally Lord doesn't take any offense towards his devotees because he sees he's very dear to him. And how to understand that, again this, that to commit sinful activities, understand the holy name of the Lord. Because see, Lord doesn't see that offense, that he's chanting my name as well as he's committing offense.
Yeah.
He doesn't see this. Because according to him, there's no sin, no pious activities also. Because the purpose of the Lord that he tries to bring or try to attract each and everybody. So how to understand this?
No, well, if you use the excuse of bhakti or the holy name to commit sinful activities, then that is devious. So that's an offense.
Intention.
Yeah. And if he simply commits, he's a devotee and somehow he lacks control of the senses and he commits a sinful activity, that's different. So if he has this attitude of, I can commit as many sinful activities as I want because I can just chant Hare Krishna and get rid of all the sinful reactions, and that becomes offense. So it's the attitude of the person. Yeah. So we can say that the case where the Lord overlooks is accidental. The other is intentional sin, where he's using bhakti in the holy name to commit more sinful activities.
See, you are explaining regarding this Gaurkishdas Baji Maharaj and Bamsidas Baji Maharaj's character. Their character is a little bit contradictory according to the and also it is very difficult to judge for normal people that their character. But no, so unless one reaches that stage, one cannot judge it, their character.
Yeah, we cannot completely, but to some degree the Madhyama can taking scripture into account, then he can to some degree understand things. In other words, the character of the Madhyama is he distinguishes different types of persons, devotee, non-devotee, and among devotees, those who are equal, those who are lower, and those who are higher. And then he treats them a little differently. He takes instructions from those who are superior, he gives instruction to those who are inferior, he's friendly with those who are... So he has to distinguish in that way. But as far as analyzing those persons who may be uttamas or whatever, he cannot do that really completely because he's not on that level. Only another person who's up on that level could really analyze completely or to a high degree. So he can't pass judgment on them. But to some degree, he can understand they're higher than him, definitely. So therefore, you can give respect in that sense.
Maharaj, in those sort of Uttama level, normally they don't make any judgment. According to them, everyone is devotee.
Yeah.
So at Uttama level, he doesn't do any judgment. So how can he see a person who is in the same level that he is also devotee?
How does he know?
Yeah, how does he? Because he doesn't make any judgment.
Well, of course, he sees everyone as in Prema, and even the demons. Yeah. And then the normal people, the neutral people, and then the devotees as well. But it's just like Krishna in the spiritual world, or when he comes in his pastimes here, there's demons, and there are people, and he doesn't hate anybody, and he's always in Prema, even if he kills the demon. Nevertheless, he has very great relationship with Mother Yasoda, Nanda Maharaj, and the cowherd boys and the gopis. It's a little bit different, his recognition of them than it is of the demons, even though they're all inundated in this ananda of Krishna. So there is some distinction there also. So for the Prema Bhakta also, when he meets other great devotees, then he has a great relishing of, rasa or whatever. So when he sees the demons or whatever, okay, he sees it all in Prema, but there's no real relationship there.
There's one question, Maharaj. He said, how to understand that repeated chanting give rise to realization of glories of holy name? Isn't a devotee needed to explain the glories?
Does a devotee have to explain the glories?
Yeah.
Well, the holy name is independent of everything in a sense. It doesn't require diksha or cleanliness or time or place, etc. And it has power. However, if we want prema, we have to chant Sudanam. And Sudanam means we need some knowledge. So therefore, we have to get some knowledge of who is Krishna, who is the jiva, some Sambandha Gyan. We have to know the difference between pure bhakti and mixed bhakti, the difference between soul and matter, etc. So we need some basic knowledge in order to come to the Sudha level, in order to get prema. But otherwise, even if we don't have knowledge, we get some effect from it. We can destroy our karmas. We can gradually get purified. But we can't get prema. So to get prema, then we need that knowledge.
Second question, how do you test the main quality, surrender, in a devotee?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, of course, it depends on your level. If you're Kanishta, it's very difficult to judge anything because you don't appreciate devotees. Now, if you're a Madhyama, then because of practice of bhakti, learning scripture, etc., mercy of Krishna and devotees, then we develop some sort of, say, spiritual perception by which we can begin to appreciate devotees, distinguish non-devotees, avoid the demons, etc., and then distinguish among the different types of devotees. So because of our advancement in bhakti and association and knowledge, then we can start making some distinctions which are important for our progress. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, I give you intelligence by which you can come to me. So then that intelligence means he gives us the intelligence by which we can distinguish things so that we can advance in devotional service.
No. Even sometimes we see the Sahaji also, they also show so much love for Krishna. Mm-hmm. But problem is that they are not able to control the senses.
Yeah.
But externally, if you see, when they show their love, it's like, they don't know anything about other than Krishna.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to judge for a...
So then you have to look constantly, see what they do after their performance. And see their actions, whatever, after a few hours or a few days or whatever. Then you can understand where they're at.
Who is going to observe this?
Well, you have to be serious enough to do that. Follow them around and look. Of course, one other thing is they are getting money. So right there is a little problem. Because the Uttama devotee is not interested in money or anything like this, but they're getting money for their services. So there is some contamination.
Okay, Maharaj. One more question. Okay. For other sampradayas, giving up nitya karmas is a sin. But even a beginner can give them up in a favor of chanting. Isn't that seventh offense?
Seventh offense?
Seventh was to commit sinful activities on the stain of the holy name. Correct? Yeah. Yeah, it said Nitya Karma cannot be given according to other Sampradayas.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, giving up. So the idea of the seventh offense is that we are protected from sin by the process of bhakti. So therefore, let us commit more sins and enjoy in the material world. So that's the whole idea. Now, in giving up nitya karmas, the whole idea there is that the process of bhakti is such that even if you don't do them, there is no sin incurred as long as we are engaged in the process of bhakti. And for some reason, we have to give them up either through because of great attachment to bhakti or for some other reason, whatever it is. So the idea is not that we're purposely committing a sin and then using bhakti to cover it up. It's just that the absorption in bhakti causes us to omit certain activities which are on a lower level. So one who's qualified for bhakti becomes not qualified for the lower level of karma or jnana. So therefore he's not obligated to follow those rules and regulations. So it's a matter of the intention behind it. The intention is that he's trying to serve the Supreme Lord. If in the process of doing that, then he neglects other things, then it's not a problem. It is said in Hari Bhakti Vilas that if he overlooks his duties or karmas or whatever, then the sages in the heavenly planets do all those activities for him. So it compensates for it like that. So it's not his intention to particularly commit a sin or whatever. Now, of course, the idea of sin itself is a little bit different here, because usually when we talk about committing sin on the strength of the holy name, we're not simply saying lack of doing karmas. It's rather the opposite, doing vikarma. I think that's the real intention there, that we're doing the forbidden activities, rather than just omitting the activities, which is also considered a sin. So why would just omitting the activities be considered a sin? It's a sin in the sense that if you don't do it, then you don't get a good result, a punya for that. So you're encouraged to do a punya. So from the point of view of bhakti, we're not interested in punya, so it's not so important that we do them or not do them. Doesn't really matter. So that is the idea there of the nitya karmas. Though we can also argue the nitya karmas are also bhakti or whatever. Essentially, they're in karma yoga system, they're meant as a punya to purify you, elevate you to sattva good, and maybe get you to svarga loka, etc. Yeah. Now, of course, we can alter them, as like the Gayatri mantra, etc. We can think of it not as a punya, but as a worship of the Supreme Lord. Ultimately, it is, but then by convention, it's become something else. Yeah? So it becomes a punya, and then you don't do the punya, then it's considered a sin. So to encourage you, they say it's sinful, so you must do it. So then you do it like that. So, in that sense, if we neglect to do those because of absorption and bhakti, then we don't get any sinful reaction for that.
Yavat karmani kurvitanna nirvyata yavata matkata shravanadava shraddha na jayate. So the shraddha is mentioned is in the level of asakti or before that?
What's that?
That shraddha yavan na jayate. As long as this you don't have complete faith in the Lord, you have to continue whatever activities you are doing, the nitya karma, other things.
Yeah.
So this shraddha is in a level of asakti or sama?
Well, it looks more like, it doesn't really say, but I would assume it starts with the process of bhakti itself.
The shraddha itself from the beginning.
Yeah. Because we're taken to the process of bhakti. So that qualifies us for doing bhakti. Once we're qualified for bhakti, we're not qualified for other things. So we have no obligation to them at that point.
So that means whenever one take up chanting Hare Krishna Mahamudaya as his goal.
And he has knowledge.
Knowledge, yeah.
We can say he's a madhyamadikari.
Oh.
Well, a Kanishta doesn't even associate with devotees, so it's like accidental chanting or worshiping the Lord because his parents did it. That's a Kanishta. So one who seriously understands the process of pure bhakti and is trying to attain prema, then we can say he's getting to the madhyama level. Yeah, with Kanishtas, they don't really, they don't know. So they're very confused about what is pure bhakti or whatever.
Hare Krishna, man. Maybe two questions. It seems one principle that you're instructing us on is that we should avoid the tendency to judge others across the board. You know, we shouldn't be walking around like some kind of caste system. Oh, he's this, he's that, he's this, he's that. But we should take shelter of the association of Vaishnavas. But there is one or two occasions in particular where we are supposed to make some judgment. You know, we want to associate with more advanced devotees, so we need some sense of who's a more advanced devotee.
Yeah, that's the Madhyamadikari. He has to do that.
and then we're supposed to, you know, accept guru. And if I followed the argument well, a lot of it kind of boils down to, at the end, it takes a little common sense. But in this world, there's not a whole lot of common sense. And we see, therefore, we see in every religious tradition, there's a tendency, somebody speaks flowery words, somebody's very rich, somebody's very handsome, somebody chants nice songs, you know, somebody flatters us. I just had an experience just yesterday of a devotee came up to me and about a year and a half ago severely chastised me as a GBC member, chastising the GBC. How could the GBC have stopped this person from initiating and telling the world he's not a good person, and not that he's not a guy, that he was not qualified to initiate, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And she came up just yesterday begging forgiveness because now she's realized that the same person who split up the marriage of her daughter and her son, it seems apparently for his own benefit, so the son could just be his personal secretary, blah, 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 blah. But a year and a half ago, I was a big offender because I didn't realize the purity of this person. You know, so we see that kind of sentiment there so often. So what advice do you give us to, you know, not prematurely think we can judge? And it's related to a second question, but I'll maybe come back to that. You know, there isn't much common sense. And there is this tendency, you know, again, I go to these anti-cult meetings and just get bombarded every year hearing about yet another so-called guru, minister, priest, this, that, who just exploited his or her, usually his followers, because people are kind of naive and gullible. So how do you, your thoughts or reflections on how to avoid being naive and gullible when there's a lack of common sense sometimes?
Well, for devotees, then I think we just have to be a little cautious about criticizing one way or the other, either condemning a person or condemning the person who condemns the person or whatever like this, and just take a little neutral attitude and see how things are going to work out and get a little more knowledge of the situation rather than just outright condemn. But of course, even that takes common sense. So I guess we have to say that devotees have to have some common sense in the sense that they do have to have a little bit of introspection, patience, tolerance, etc., humility, and not pass judgments on people, not have fault finding or kuti nati or whatever like that, which is an anartha. So they do have to, you know, restrain themselves to some degree in terms of judging others. On the other hand, yes, we do have to make judgments as a Madhyamadikari. And to do that, then we do have some scriptural standards for that also. You know, what is a demon, or what do we class as a dvesha, one who hates the devotees of the Lord? And we have some explanation of that. Who is a devotee? What are the different types of devotees? And here we have the whole the qualities of the Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttama. So we get some standards to follow at least. So that requires some knowledge. So devotees should also have knowledge in order to, operate properly as devotees. So that's what the Madhyamadikari basically has. He has knowledge, so he can distinguish different types of devotees and apply that in his treatment of different types of people and devotees. And that way he can advance. And if he doesn't do that properly, then he doesn't advance. He may commit offenses instead. So we need some knowledge, and we need maybe through proper association, plus some good qualities like patience and tolerance.
So, related question. Within ISKCON, following the Vaishnava process, in the Vedic process, one should approach someone who has knowledge to become guru. And within ISKCON, the GBC's kind of taken this hands-off position as much as possible, as I see it. Local people can determine and go through this process, and then if there's something really questionable, only then the GBC will step in, sometimes because they know some history that maybe local people don't know.
Yeah.
There are those who feel, no, that's not, it should solely be at the discretion of the individual devotee who's looking for a guru.
Yeah.
I tend to think that we need a little of that check and balance, because sometimes the person seeking doesn't have all that knowledge, and sometimes local people don't have that knowledge, that it's a reasonable check and balance to have some opportunity for higher authorities to say, well, in this case, we don't really want to give our blessings.
Yeah.
Could you reflect your thoughts on that?
Well, there is, I think the Sabhas put up some proposal to release the GBC from their duties and let it be more spontaneous.
And not knowing if I'll get a chance to talk to you about it individually, I'm taking advantage of having the mic to ask you now.
So it looks good in one sense to do something like that it's a spontaneous thing of who you choose as your mentor or guru or whatever like that. But I think the other thing is maybe we have to examine not only our society, other places also, and see how that works out. What is the repercussions of doing something like that, or if it's ever done at all? So I would think probably it isn't. There is some regulation somewhere along the line. It's not just everybody chooses anybody and follows them. So we have to have some sort of system of recognition of authorities somewhere along, whether it's a GBC or a temple president or a guru, Shiksha guru or a Diksha guru, whatever. There has to be some sort of regulation there somewhere. Just how that takes place is we have to discuss, but there has to be there somehow or other. Whether it's a GBC that does it or something else, I don't know. But maybe it goes down to the local committee, but there has to be some regulated body somewhere along the line. Yeah? And maybe a check and balance with the GBC behind that. So maybe that's how that problem is solved. There's less responsibility of the GBC, but they do have a casting vote, so to speak, or a veto in some cases where they see something is going off, and like that. So maybe that's a system that has to be evolved.
One last question, if I can.
That's only because of the idea of organization. Huh? Now, where there were no organizations, you were free to go anywhere, wander around the whole of India and choose your guru. So, okay, you can do that. But, when we have an organization, then it becomes a little more particular. And we see that within each sampradaya, they do have systems. It's not that everybody is a guru. They have, protocols of who is the guru. In some cases, it's all family lines. Like in Sri Sampradaya, basically, it's family lines. And then you can't choose anybody, you got to choose those ones. Or we have the Goswami lines in Gaudiya history, and those are the gurus, Goswami lines like that. So ISKCON's a little different. We don't have Goswami lines, we don't have hereditary lines or anything, but then at the same time, we can't just have a free-for-all also.
One last question. Sometimes, again, the topic of guru, some places in the Shastra describes one should have only Uttamadhikari guru, elsewhere it seems not.
Yeah.
And often there's this discussion that Uttama is described in a certain section of the Shastra paper, perhaps Bhagavatam in this way, another section in this way. Can you explain?
Yeah, that confusion comes here actually in the purport itself. It's not quite clear what they're talking about, even though the definition given here is very exalted. It's a Prema bhakta. But then when it gets into the commentary, it kind of gets a little confusing there a little bit about who the Uttama is and the pure devotee, etc. So there are two definitions. This is the one definition, which is definitely a Prema Bhakta who sees Krishna at all times and Prema everywhere, like the gopis. And the example is the gopis, so it's a very elevated position. The other Uttama is the one described in the Nectar Devotion there, under Vaidhi Bhakti, sadhana, according to faith. So we have the Kanishta in faith, he has very weak faith, Komala Sraddha. We have the Madhyama, who has a little stronger faith, but he hasn't got enough that he can defeat people who challenge. And then we have the Uttama, who has very deep faith and very deep knowledge of scripture, and he uses logic so that he convinces others and is never defeated. So he's called the Uttama. But that's within Vaidhi Bhakti, it's sadhana actually. So that's another type of uttama. So we may use the term, but we have to be very careful which term we're using. So we say only in uttama adhikari, this definition is prem bhakta, then that means hardly any guru in the whole world, because it's very, very rare to get a prem bhakta anywhere. If we say the other one, then it becomes more common. But if we kind of switch between the two, it's like, then the definitions become blurred. So in the Nectar of Instruction there, Prabhupada talks about the Uttama devotee, and then finally he says, anyone who chants 16 rounds and follows the regulated principles can initiate. So he doesn't put it at the Prem Bhakta level there, but it seems he is in one place, at the same time. So it's a little bit of a confusion there also. And people may, use one way or the other, okay, none of you are qualified as gurus because you're not that level there. But then on the other hand, everybody's chanting 16 rounds and following regulated principles. So a lot of people come within that category.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, you were talking about having common sense. But if we
common sense based on scripture, I suppose.
Based on the scripture, of course. And in Bhagavad Gita, we say Tadvidi Pranipatena. So in that, even to gain the knowledge about the absolute truth, one has to approach a spiritual master. So even before getting any scriptural knowledge, we have to approach a spiritual master. But without knowing who can be a spiritual master, how we can approach the right person. Earlier it was like, somebody who comes in parampara, or somebody who comes, in their family tradition, they automatically go and choose. But in ISKCON we have different devotees and different levels of devotees, insisting on different details of Krishna consciousness. So sometimes that makes us little confused in whom to choose, or is there a difference in what it happened earlier and now what it happens in ISKCON in choosing a spiritual master?
Well, the basic qualification ultimately is faith. It's with faith that we accept the process of pure bhakti and the bhakti scriptures and whatever they tell us. And then based on that, then we approach devotees, including a guru, in order to start the practice of bhakti and, of course, learn more of the scriptures. So it'll depend on our faith, how that faith developed, who we will choose. Now, of course, if we're in ISKCON and we got a choice within ISKCON, it's not so much of a problem, because at least we got the right tattva. It's not Mayavadi and it's not some Sampradaya or whatever. So in that sense, we're a little bit safe. It's just a matter of more the detail, who we want to choose in that case. And that's, we say, a personal choice also.
When Anuttama Prabhu asked that, he was talking about common sense within ISKCON.
Yeah.
So how then these two relate to it? Any of ISKCON devotees?
Well, we can say that your common sense probably will develop along with your faith by the mercy of Krishna. In other words, due to our Gata Sukritis over many lifetimes, we've developed a little common sense to understand that bhakti is the process, at least. And we don't argue with that principle, at least, So that much common sense we have.